Okay, what's next?
Sound system.
Sound system. You got to have a good sound system for a lot of reasons. One is that if people can't hear you, and a lot of people can't hear that well, and they don't want to admit it, but then they won't get the information. That's the simple reason. Another thing is you can't use your voice inflection. So if I want to use this is a technique called a whisper technique where you go up to one person. I'm going to go up to Bob here. And Bob, this is just between you and me. Okay? I can see everybody else eavesdropping on us, right? Right? It's an attention-gaining device, but you can't do it without a good sound system because people couldn't hear me in the back whispering. Okay? So you need a good sound system to be able to use the range of your voice inflection. Now, I'm a pretty loud and fast presenter, but if I get quiet and go over here to Victoria, that's an attention-gaining device. Right? Everybody's zooming in on it. And if you're normally a quiet presenter, what you would do is find a portion of your material to get excited about. And then people go, whoa, that must be important, see? So you do the opposite of whatever the norm is, and that's attention-gaining device. But you got to have a good sound system. And I'm a big fan of handheld microphones for several reasons. One is I clear my throat a lot. I know that the voice people say it's not good, but when I'm off stage, now right now I've got this because it's going to the video, but this is the sound system going to the house or where you are. If I want to clear my throat, I can do it, and it's, you know, when you're talking thousands of people or big crowds, I can do it, nobody hears it. You know, with this, it'll go through the sound system. You don't always have a sound person running the sound for you in the smaller venues, so you're stuck with this being hot all the time. This you can turn off and turn on. The sound quality is better. It also allows me to go up here to Cynthia and say, hi, Cynthia.
Hi, Tom. How are you?
Good. I'm glad you made it today.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it's an engaging thing, like Phil Donahue. You can go out and interview people. If you try to use this, it gets embarrassing. Talk to my chest, and you can make jokes about it. You know, but this is much better for that. So, and don't tell me, oh, well, I use overheads, I can't do it. Well, you just didn't practice enough. And I have an overhead in my basement. If I'm using overheads, I'll practice where I'm going to put my slides, how I'm going to change hands. These aren't the best microphones, so you hear a little noise off them. So I've been reducing the changing hands so that you don't get that noise. But you practice a little bit. The only time I don't use this is if I'm doing heavy magic. And then still I might use it and use a mic stand and do the magic around the mic stand. So, yes, Margaret.
You take your mic with you then when you talk?
This mic, no, normally they provide them, and this is a piece of junk Radio Shack that I had in the basement.
What if they don't? They figure you don't need a mic, then you take one.
No, that doesn't happen. You control that ahead of time. When they hire me, they say, what's my AV requirements? And I give them to them, and then I double check and demand that they do them because that's my deal. You know? Now, I'm not going to be a smart aleck about it, but I'm going to be so professional about it in the beginning. This is what I require, and they expect it. When they're paying that kind of money, they don't worry about $100 more for a mic or something. So, yeah. Okay, what's next?
Lighting.
Lighting. Now, we changed the lighting a little bit in this case because we're using the video lights. But normally you want the lights full bright because, remember, you want to be able to see each other's faces, right? So the lights are full bright. Now, this is different than like a comedy club setting where the presenter is real bright and the audience is dim. And why do you think they do that? Because they're drinking and they want to remain anonymous and hoop it up and make lots of laughter. So that's why it's in a comedy club. But in here, you want them to see each other and agree and shake their heads and all that stuff to add up to a good presentation. So recap the room setup for me. What are the parameters? Semicircular seating if you can get it. What else?
Handheld mic.
Handheld mic if you can. Good sound system.
And bright lights.
Bright lights. Right. You want them to see each other. Okay.
I know something
Yes.
else, Tom. You was checking the speakers over so you don't get that feedback.
That's right.
Check that also.
Okay, I do, and that wasn't happening earlier, but this, now what he's talking about, Warren asked me about, I moved a little bit because I was getting some feedback. Feedback occurs when your microphone is in front of a speaker, and it creates a loop where the sound is coming out of the speaker into the microphone and then back to the speaker, and then it creates that noise. So you have to look for what we call hot spots. So I walked around earlier to find them, and then I messed up a little bit and walked under this speaker that caused a little bit of feedback, so I moved. You need to check this before you get there, but it changes because the people in the room absorb the sound. So you have to adjust on stage, but you have to know where it's coming from, and usually you can take care of it. All right, is that thing making noise, or is that somebody outside beating on something? Well, I'm going to beat on him for a little bit. Look at this. They're building the pool. Well, another technique I just used there. First of all, you do not totally ignore distractions, because everybody else was listening to that. Okay, hopefully by addressing it, we can just live with it. Or Nancy, you going to ask them about that? Thanks. But if you ignore distractions, nobody's going to hear what you say anyway. And I got a good example of this. One is that I was introducing a big name speaker one time. Right behind me, a poor setup, it was a doorway with a thermostat. As soon as I started introducing the guy, the maintenance man comes in there and starts adjusting it with a screwdriver and a belt and is doing this. Now, a couple seconds would be fine. There's no problem, let him do it. This was like 2 minutes, 3 minutes. He's oblivious to all these people out in front of us. So there's no way that I can overcome this and give this guy a good introduction. So what did I do? I went over to the guy and I said, and I went off the microphone because I didn't want to embarrass the guy. And I asked him, can you read? Off the microphone. He said, yeah, I can read. I'm a college graduate. And I said, well, would you read this for me? He's thinking, this is the best thing that ever happened in this hotel in a million years. He read the introduction. The place went ape over it. That gives him a story of the rest of his life. The speaker comes on to a rousing, wild round of applause. And we turn something that would have been a distraction and a negative into a big positive. You can't ignore distractions, all right? They will be looking at them. So you turn. The reason I went off microphone, because if the guy was illiterate or something, I didn't want to embarrass him. So, and that'll kill you in a presentation. You never tease anybody that's perceived at a low level. You can tease the CEO and the executives and all that because they're still the CEO and executives, but not a lower level person. Okay, what's next? Introductions. Many of you are introduced by yourself. In other words, you walk in and you decide it's time to start class. Now, you keep those introductions extremely short. You don't brag about yourself, which looks really bad. You might just give them a hello, how are you? I'm Joe. I'm here to do this because of this, and let's get right into it. Then, if you want to brag about yourself, this is how you do it. During the talk, you might say, when I was coaching so-and-so to do so-and-so, or when I was consulting with XYZ company, this is what we learned. That's how you get your brag stuff in when you're self-introduced. Okay? Yes, she likes that one. If you are introduced by an introducer, you take control of your introduction. Brandy and I worked a little banter back and forth because she's my intern and the Clinton stuff and the things that I normally wouldn't do in a presentation. But I told her, if you're going to say the word intern, you've got to joke about it because everybody's going to stop and think, DC intern, okay? So we worked on that a little bit. So you take control of your introductions, try to keep them less than a minute. What she did was a whole warm-up act for a whole day thing, you know, with the balloons and the icebreaker type thing. You give them a source of your credibility, which authorship and media attention that you've had is great, but not too much of it. And then another interesting thing that you'll see later in the humor segment is a piece of test humor in your introduction. Now, we didn't do it in this introduction because the whole thing was a little lighthearted, but a piece of test humor inserted in your introduction tells you, when I'm off the side watching the crowd, I'm watching for your response to this piece of humor in my introduction. If you don't even crack a smile, I have more than one opening ready to go. Okay? So I won't use the humorous one, and I'll know that I need more content and warm up before I start. If you laugh a lot at it, then I know I can just basically do whatever I want because you're already warmed up. That's test humor. There's a whole file of it on my website, and we'll see some of it later, that you can just pick and choose and use it in your introductions. All right? All right.
Openings.
Openings. Let's see. What page are we on? I get lost. Openings. Here we go. There's a lot of ways to do an opening. One, what is one of the ones I put there?
Funny or serious?
Yeah, you could. First, you decide if you want a funny or serious one. If you're there to entertain, you might use a funny one. Don't go back to this old technique and feel that you have to tell some kind of joke at the start. That's old style, and the worst thing you can do is tell a joke and then make them think it's going to be fun and then disappoint them the rest of the time. Right? You're better off leaving it out and surprise them with some humor later. You're better off. They'll like you better for it. So decide funny or serious. Then what's one of the ways you could do?
Response to introduction.
Okay, a response to your introduction. This is part of your opening, and this is where you say something to the person that introduced you. Now, it can be as short as, thank you so much for that nice introduction. I know my mother wrote it, and all those old ones. And hey, Jeff, in this case, we did one where I was getting you to thank everybody, the volunteers. So that was kind of my response to Brandy and the other folks in a different way. So the first thing you do is introduction and respond to your introduction. All right, what's next?
Localized or personalized comments.
Localized or personalized comments. Many times I'll have two openings ready and I'll throw both of them out in favor of this one really killer technique. This is, if there's something going on that everybody in the crowd knows about, and you make a comment about it, that'll usually override most of your other planned introductions. Here's an example of it. I was doing a luncheon where it was a ladies' function, and the menu item was tuna temptation. All these ladies were buzzing about this. Oh, how wonderful the tuna temptation was. And it was just wonderful. Oh, did you try the tuna temptation? It was just wonderful. So I'm sitting there, young guy. These were mostly older ladies. And I'm thinking, what am I going to say about this? So I got up and I threw out my regular and all my regular openings. And I said, I want to thank you for having me. I normally don't like seafood. But that catfish convulsion was really great. And they cracked up and boom, you're on your way. See, so a localized, personalized comment will get you further than many of your planned comments. Next. Ask a question. Now you can ask a funny question. You could ask like, how many of you out there are wearing clean underwear because your mother said you might get in an accident? Okay? And don't we normally do a lot of things that our parents instilled in us? Boom, you're on your way. You ask a funny question. You could ask a serious question too. Maybe what if I ask you this question? What's your first name? Rita. Do you have any kids? Rita, when they were little, would you know what to do if you walked in their room and one of them was laying there breathless? Boom, grab them by the throat, right, on that one. Especially the mothers in the crowd that have thought about what would I do if my child is, not breathing. So that's a way. I got goose pimples on that one. Yeah, see? All right, and talk about grabbing somebody. See, so that's a way to do an opening. Ask a question, decide if you want a funny one or a serious one. All right, what's next?
Make an outrageous statement.
Make an outrageous statement. In our district, I found out that 250 water buffaloes are receiving Social Security. Well, of course that's not true. It's ridiculous, isn't it? That 250 water buffaloes would be receiving Social Security. No more than 100 would be. Anything's possible in her district. Well, sure, that's outrageous, but it's not as outrageous as XYZ. Okay? There's an opening based on an outrageous statement. All right? Use a quotation. You can use a quotation to open. Let's say, anybody have any good? Did you pick a quotation that Yeah, there was some. There's a whole book here I brought. It's called the Dictionary of Humorous Quotations. So you can find quotations. One of my favorites is Mark Twain. Is one of my favorites. I quote him all the time. He says, "God made idiots. That was for starters, and then he made school boards." All right, that was his quote. All right, now guess what? You can change these around a little bit. You could say, God made idiots, and then he made something else, okay? And some of the purists would say, well, Mark Twain would turn over at his grave. You're not saying his quote right. And I say, let him spin. You know, I don't care. He's what he's going to do. You know? Right? What's the deal? I don't care. And as long as you aren't acting like you're quoting it exactly, you know, say I'm paraphrasing it a little bit. So you can substitute and use quotes, and they raise your credibility because somebody else said it. You're just repeating it. So that's a good way to.
You mentioned that Mark Twain said it's even if changed.
I do mention it. Yeah, I said this is something that something like Mark Twain said, or I usually play the dummy, which is easy. So I usually say I think he said something like this, and that way it gives you an out. You're not claiming that that's the exact quote. All right. What's another way?
Mention a periodical or news item.
This is a great way to show your currency, and this is one through the book I have sprinkled what we call genius techniques, and these are techniques that make you look right on the cutting edge and make really cool. And one of them is just, I challenge you, before you do a speech, is to grab the paper, and I guarantee you there'll be something in that paper that will support or augment the points you're trying to make for a speech you're doing that day, and use it. There's nothing more current than the newspaper, other than the internet. I mean, you could probably have a computer up here and find something, but if you bring the paper in, people relate to that, and they'll see that you couldn't have made that up ahead of time. That's not a canned act or a dog and pony show. This is current, and that's what you want to be, current. And there's other ways to do this too. I have what they call a clipping service on the internet, and this searches constantly for keywords that have to do with whatever I'm talking about. And I'll tell you what, if you want to look cool, this will do it. I spoke to Hallmark Cards one time, and as soon as I got the job, I put the keywords Hallmark Cards, American Greetings, which is their competition, and greeting cards in the computer. Let it go. The day of the presentation, in the morning, I opened the computer up. I had a whole load of articles off of media around the world that had those keywords in them. I showed, and you get rid of some of them. Some of them are just junk, but some of them are things that they don't even know. I walked into that meeting with an article about their company that they didn't even know about. Did I look cool? Yes, I did. All right. Did I look valuable to them? Yes, I did. And it was a simple $10 a month thing on CompuServe. And maybe even free now, I don't know. So clipping services and periodicals and things, the more you read, the more current you'll be, and you'll be able to relate it to your points. All right?
Start to tie the beginning to the end.
Here's some real cool opening techniques. Who's the guy, the rest of the story guy?
Paul Harvey.
Paul Harvey. All right, I just used a technique on you. I'm sorry I had to do it. Pretend to forget technique. All right, and this isn't an opening, but this is a pretend to forget. I know who it's Paul Harvey, and I don't think that everybody's thinking, boy, Tom's an idiot because he couldn't remember Paul Harvey. You might be thinking that for other reasons, but not for Paul Harvey. Now, I had everybody in here like, oh, helping me. You know, they're all saying, oh, that's Paul Harvey, right? That's an involvement technique, pretend to forget. Now, the opening and close, what he does is he gives you what is the rest of the story. And I just used another one on you, okay? I had you yell at me just by going like this, all right? Involvement. So what you do is you begin a story at the beginning, and you build up to an important point, and then you say, we're going to get back to that later, and you leave them hanging on the cliff. And I always get, when I use this technique, and I have several different ways to use it, people never leave before I'm done, okay? I do a lot of meeting professionals where it's luncheon, and 1 o'clock, boom, they get up and they leave, no matter what. Not me, because they're waiting to hear what the deal was from the setup that I did in the beginning, all right? That's called a split story technique. That's a good way to open. Another one.
Calendar opening.
Calendar opening. This is a cool one. This is very polished. What I'll do is I'll say, picture with me, if you will. Who said that? Who's old enough to remember that? No, Rod Serling, not Dale Carnegie. I'll say, picture up here a giant calendar book. And let's say the date is February 6th, 2000. What did you do as these pages turned on your calendar book so that when February 6th, 2000 rolls around, you will have had your best year ever? Somebody violated the pager rule. I hear pager. Is it for me? No problem. That's all right. See, you don't ignore distractions. I don't mind if she got paged in the middle of my important point. No, no, it's okay. So I used the calendar technique. I took them a year ahead, and then I said, well, what we're going to talk about today is what you can do as those pages turn so that when February 6, 2000 comes, you'll have your best year ever. Then at the end of the speech, I come back to it and I say, you remember all these pages that we turned today? Well, guess what? When February 6th, 2000, remember this could be an hour later, when it turns and lands on February 6th, 2000, if you do the things we talked about today, you will have had your best year ever. All right? So it's a very polished opening and closing. What's next?
Opening do's and don'ts.
Opening do's and don'ts. Don't create controversy. Yell them out there for me, Christine, real loud.
Big points people agree with first.
Yeah, try to get them to like you first before you start getting a little controversial. What else?
Don't tell a long and involved story.
Don't go into long, involved stories in your opening, because if it bombs, you're going to be swinging in the wind.
Tell them why you're there.
Tell them why you're there. I tried to tell you earlier, I'm here to teach you techniques that are going to make you great speakers, get people to move to action, and that's why I'm here with you today. And that's why I think I need to move you to action to take a break. Thank you very much. We'll come back in the next segment with a very powerful technique. Thank you. Thank you. Hey, please don't get up. Thank you.